20,000 words, 134 teams, everyone ranked from 1 to 134. Fox Sports National College Football analyst RJ Young joins us now on the Will Cain Show. What's up, RJ?
Chilling, Money. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
How in the world do you rank 134 teams? How in the world do you write 20,000 words? And I'm dead serious now. Do you spend time breaking down every depth chart, watching games from last year, talking to the coaches? That's a lot, man, because, look, I could talk to you about maybe Texas versus Georgia, but how you come up with that ULM is the worst team in the country, or Akron is 132, or Kent State 131, I don't know. How do you do it, RJ?
Probably the same way that you got through law school, dog. Like, you're never as smart as when you're taking that test as you are when you're taking that test. So ask me about ULM 2 months ago, and I got the Warhawks dead to rights. If you asked me about the Kent State Owls 2 months ago, I got them dead to rights. But this is about 6 weeks of me talking to folks, of me looking at those depth charts, taking into account administration, those sorts of changes, philosophies, coordinators, transfer portal, all of it. You name it. I took a look at it. But I think at the top, and the way that I describe this is, start with this. Who do you think is the best team capable of winning the national championship, and go from there? Where that gets interesting is after we get past 25, believe it or not. Like, I got a lot of pushback on some teams, but usually what people do is they scroll down to their team and then they tell me that I'm wrong about their team, which is okay. I just want you to give me an argument. This is not your daddy's Facebook page. Build an argument and let's hear it out.
Well, it's the world of college football, so of course people are going to get mad and have arguments about why you've done the worst job in the history of the world, RJ, in ranking their team or ranking college football. But I will spend some time with you today talking about the top 10, about legitimate national championship hopes. But I guess because I always like deep cuts, I don't want to start talking about Ohio State. I want to start talking about a team and a program that you identify in looking at all 134 programs in Division 1A who you think, given everything they have, coach, recruiting bases, resources, should be much higher in your rankings. I mean, they are significantly underperforming their brand and who they are. I'm curious who you came out with, and you're like, I cannot believe I have Washington at 83, which, by the way, you do. In the national title game last year, this year, Washington, 83.
You know, Washington is an easy pull there, and we can talk about them. But I'm really talking about Notre Dame. If we're going to get into the weeds on this, okay? I got them at 16. That's a team for many people. That's a top 10 team. And I'm like, I don't see it. Number one, you're bringing over Mike Denbrock, who produced a Heisman winner in Jaden Daniels, but we didn't know that Mike Denbrock was that sort of an offensive coordinator, kind of like Mark Whipple at Pittsburgh, until he got the pieces. Then we saw a play from Jaden Daniels that we had never, ever seen before. And I'm not sure he could do again if you asked him to. And now you're trying to take Mike Denbrock and sprinkle him on top of Riley Leonard, which is great if those two can gel. But I just saw them have Sam Hartman, who led the ACC all time in passing touchdowns, and they couldn't get it done. We keep talking about Notre Dame as a team that ought to contend for a national championship, but all they seem to do is get to that place and then get just smacked. I would love to see them live up to the billing that we give them, because I'm in this moment where I'm a Formula One fan, and so follow me here. Ferrari gets the benefit of the doubt. We pay Ferrari a little bit more attention than we probably should. They haven't won much in a long time. That's Notre Dame for me. Join a conference. Otherwise, I continue to see you going down. We could talk about Washington, but Notre Dame is my bugaboo right now.
I totally agree with you about joining a conference, or I continue to see you going down. I had a conversation with Outkick's Barrett Sally a few weeks ago, looking at his rankings and his projected top 12 playoff, and it was just, I mean, it's just so dominated now by two conferences. And yours at the top is as well. Yours through the top, I'd say, what is it, top 10 certainly. It's dominated by two conferences. And I think Notre Dame, as long as they stand out there on their own, they're going to have trouble living up to who they're supposed to be, living up to that brand. There's another brand that you have ranked, I think, is fascinating, and that's Colorado. You have a 41. People are going to pay attention to Colorado because of Deion and because of the way they came out last year at the beginning of the season. Where do you sense that they are? Like, I'm starting to think that Deion's. It's like it's easy to say it's been overhyped, but he sold too much too soon, and I don't know when you do that what this looks like for you over the next 5 years. He's banking on the transfer portal. He's not doing well in recruiting classes. How long does he have to come in somewhere better than 41?
I think he's got as long as he needs and as long as he wants because he's winning everywhere else. You have prospective applications through the roof at Colorado. You're selling out games at Colorado. You're on national television. Their game against Colorado State outdrew Oregon, Washington for the Pac-12 championship. So it's working in everywhere but wins and losses. He brings in 90 transfers over the last 2 cycles. We don't seem to pay that much attention until you're me and you're going, I don't really like what you brought in this year. And we've seen this before, right? When I was ahead on Colorado last year, it's because I thought that people were undervaluing them. And I was right through 3 games, and then the wheels fell off for a number of reasons. But I think right now, it's not the 41 that I think you should be concerned with if you're Colorado. It's that most of us don't believe you're going to finish in the top half of the Big 12. And that is where we're actually going to have this discussion about who they can be, because you win that conference championship, you're getting into the college football playoff. And he has said, look, if you're going to make a pick, given the same record, you're going to put me into the college football playoff. I'm going, yeah, Prime, I'll put you in anything. You played in the World Series, you played in the Super Bowl. You changed the balance of power in the NFL by going from the Niners to Dallas, or other way around, excuse me. But the point there is,
no, it's the right way.
Prime is, yeah,
that's the right way.
Prime is, oh, I did? And you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, you would know. Prime is Prime. Colorado's Colorado, right? That's the point. I think as we continue to talk about them, we're going to take a look at that offensive line. We're going to take a look at that defensive line. But really what it's going to come down to is, what are you doing when it comes time to play conference? What are you doing after Nebraska? I had him at, my goodness, if I had to do this in 2023, I think I would have had him around 27, right? 28, that SMU slot right now, where I feel real good about them. But right now, I think 41 is fair.
Well, I was looking also, you did a top 5 quarterback ratings, and it got my attention because you had Quinn Ewers at Texas at number 1. But if memory serves, RJ, you did not have Shedeur Sanders in your top 5 quarterbacks. And, I mean, every NFL mock draft has him top 2 or 3, top 10 pick, top 2 or 3 quarterbacks. You don't see it with Shedeur?
Look, I think he is perhaps going to get drafted in the first round because we value quarterbacks that highly in the sport. It is the most important position in all of football. And I'm actually working on another list, the top 100 superstars in college football, and he's number 1 on that list, okay? And it's 2 things to go into that: playmaking ability and popularity. The only person in college to outsell Shedeur Sanders in jerseys is Caitlin Clark, who is her own phenomenon, right? We would all agree about that. And when you're talking about who would you want to build your program around from day one, you had to build a college football program today. You're going to take a quarterback that can sling it, and you're going to take a quarterback that people want to watch throw the football. He satisfies that. Now, and as far as being one of the 5 best quarterbacks in our sport, he has some things to do. I think what's more interesting about this is preseason AP All-America teams came out yesterday, as we're doing this on a Tuesday, excuse me. And he was snubbed. And I'm going, snubbed or just not one of the 3 best quarterbacks in all of college football? What are we doing here? We can say he's great. We don't have to say he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the sport.
So you've got him at number 1, though, on college football superstars. You're going to do a list of 100 college football superstars, which factors in popularity, to your point. I'll be really curious, RJ, where you have Arch Manning. Because as you were describing that, you were describing like who you'd take. The truth is, I think I'd take I'm a homer. I'm a Longhorn fan. But I think most people, coaches would say, if that's what I'm trying to factor in, superstar status, popularity, I think Arch would be number 1. He just happens to be a backup right now. But if he were a starting quarterback, I think he'd be blowing out jerseys, blowing out national coverage, blowing out ink. It'd be all about Arch Manning.
I don't think you're wrong. And as an Oklahoma fan, you'd be surprised to know I got him at 11, right? Just outside the top 10.
11?
Yeah, for that reason. But it's about, let me see a guy that can play and who's already shown people what you can expect, right? The way I kind of think about this is, if we have all in on a 5-star recruit and that dude does not play to the level we expect him to play, He's no longer as valuable as we once thought. Now, the thing you got going for Arch is a hell of a spring game. But outside of that, still kind of want to see it. I want to see him do it in the SEC. And by the way, y'all get Ohio State in 2025. And I'm excited about that as I have any game that might be on television all of next year. But I think you got a point, right? You got a great point in as far as the family, the branding, the kind of player he might turn out to be. But I got, in those first 10 spots, guys that have played and guys that have shown me a little bit of something before we assign them superstar.
Do you have Quinn Ewers above Arch Manning when it comes to superstar?
I do.
You do? I think that's fair. I mean, people forget how big of a recruit Quinn was. And by the way, not just how big of a recruit. I mean, he was legitimately a bigger recruit than Arch Manning in terms of like consensus rating. But he was also kind of a superstar. Like, he was the kid who left high school early. Everyone knew who Quinn Ewers was, big NIL deals. So, I mean, he's just, the only thing that's taking away from, well, two things. He's not that actually big of a personality. I think people thought he was, but he's not that big of a personality. He's kind of a quiet guy. And he's got Arch Manning behind him. But other than that, he's a superstar, or at least so we thought when he came out of high school.
I still think he's a superstar. I really do. And I think he fits Texas perfectly, honestly. From the tweet about how did I get towed on the first game because he was parked where he wasn't supposed to be parked with the truck. That dude had a skull ring in the back of his jeans when I got to see him at media days last year. It was a lot of fun. He fits who you should be if you're going to be that quarterback. Low key, even keel, tremendous arm, tremendous talent, right? We know this. And I kind of wonder what happens if he's allowed to go to Texas to start, to take advantage of his superstardom as opposed to starting out that career at Ohio State and then eventually transferring back home. But any quarterback that leads Texas to a Big 12 championship in the college football playoff is a superstar. There's no doubt.
You know, one more question about Texas, and I'm going to ask you about your team, Oklahoma. But you talked about Texas playing Ohio State in 2025. You ranked your top 5 non-conference games going into this season. For anybody interested, this is what it looks like. At number 5, RJ has Alabama at Wisconsin. At number 4, he has Florida State at Notre Dame. At number 3, in week 1, Georgia versus Clemson. 2, LSU versus USC. And your top non-conference game this year is Texas versus Michigan. They'll do Michigan this year, Ohio State next year. This Michigan game, it's interesting. On one hand, RJ, it kind of doesn't matter. Meaning, if Texas loses this game and goes and does well in the SEC, no one's going to remember much this Michigan game. Michigan maybe have a little more writing on it. Like, who are you? Are you still a national title contender? Are you still a national brand this year under new coaching? But people kind of are treating this game, whether or not it matters, as a truth serum game. Like, this is who we find out who either of you are at this point in 2024.
I think so. And I think this is going to be really interesting now because you know better than most. You're down 2 scholarship running backs at Texas, right? One guy we know is a superstar in C.J. Baxter. One guy that we thought could rise to the level of superstar in Christian Clark. He gives me DeMarco Murray vibes. I think that dude's going to be really great when he comes back from injury, catching the ball out of the backfield. That said, you're also going to play Michigan after both of you were in the college football playoff, and not for nothing, we probably are going to pick Texas to win that game too, right? I know how it ended. I know how it worked out. And Michigan just ran through every barrier that there seemed to be in their way on the field and off the field. I think what I'm really going to look at is, we're talking about these 2 power conferences, these super conferences making up the bulk of these top 25s. This is going to be a referendum on the SEC and the Big Ten. And I'm enjoying that part of it, especially with Sharon Moore going into year 1 and all that's going on around Michigan too. They don't even know who the starting quarterback's going to be. Could be Jack Tuttle. I hope it's Alex Orji because I think that dude can sling it. Donovan Edwards needs to absolutely show me that he's the kind of guy that we all think he could be. But Texas goes up there and they win by 3 scores. I'm not going to be the only person that thinks highly of Texas. They go in there and it's a close ball game. I think we're going to say, oh, the champs are the champs, no matter the turnover, no matter what they lost, and Texas is back to the drawing board. I think we're going to overreact to that game. I really do. That's why it's number 1. But I am very excited about it because I believe it's also the first time that they're going to play each other in the regular season at all. And nothing charges me up more than the first time meeting between Blue Bloods.
So your squad, Oklahoma. So it's interesting. You have Oklahoma at 11. which, at first blush, I'm like, that's way higher than I feel like most people are ranking Oklahoma right now. And I'm not just picking a fight. But you also have Oklahoma, by these rankings, 7th in the SEC. So you can see by virtue of this, the SEC is dominating your top 11. I mean, you could go top 13 rankings dominated by the SEC. I just keep coming away from this. Like, can Oklahoma, this is what will be fascinating to me, RJ. Can Oklahoma be the 7th best team in the SEC and almost a top 10 team in the country? Like, if you're 7th in the SEC, what does your record look like? What does that mean? Is that 4 losses, 3 losses, 4 losses? You're, a mid-tier team in the SEC, but you're a top-tier team in the nation?
Well, let's look at it from this standpoint. I got Alabama at number 9. That makes Alabama the 5th best team in the SEC. And all they did was win the SEC championship last year and made the college football playoff. We're really just talking about the depth of a league. Now, when I talk about Oklahoma, I am passionate. And like you, I do not pretend to not be for Oklahoma. That's my squad. That's my team.
Okay.
That's where I grew up. It's where I'm from. However, you look at the schedule that Oklahoma got, and I'm not picking a fight. I'm just going to say what it is. Y'all get Vanderbilt on the road. And I'm going, where's our Vanderbilt? We get Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee. Plus, oh yeah, Red River rivalry. Like that, it feels like a lot. So I'm going to say that Oklahoma wins 9-10 games. They're getting into the playoff. And that's what that spot's about, right? I think we're going to get at least 2 from both of those conferences. I don't know that we're going to get 3 from both of those conferences. And then we're going to start looking at who are the ranked opponents on your schedule. And Oklahoma's liable to have 6, right? 6 of your 12 opponents are ranked. And that's just in the SEC. I think that if Oklahoma beats the right teams, meaning Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, so forth, they're going to get in. Now, that game against Missouri gives me the willies. Missouri's a comer. I got them ranked just ahead, right? I expect Ole Miss to be a comer. LSU to be a comer. So we'll see. I'm putting it at 9-10 wins.
Where are you from, RJ?
I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Really? Okay. Then you go to OU?
For grad school. I went to the University of Tulsa for undergrad.
This is a little bit like me. Yeah, I went to UT for grad school. What do you root for the Golden Hurricane as well?
I do. And I'm catching all sorts of hell for ranking them 119. And I'm going, hey guys, we got dudes around here too.
They're 119.
Oh yeah. I
see it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm catching hell. They're like, oh, well, there's the unbiased party right there. And I'm going, hey man, give me something to work with here. I got a nephew that's on the roster, but everybody understands around here that we are a stepping stone to a bigger place, right? When we do it right, that's what the University of Tulsa is as the smallest FBS program, the smallest FBS school in all of football. So I go back and...
Is that right? Smallest by student body?
By student body and
really?
Pro Football Hall of Famers.
How many people go to Tulsa?
Goodness me, you would ask. I want to say it's all from the law school to undergrad, about 3,000.
Yeah, that's Pepperdine size. That's where I went to undergrad. Yeah, that's interesting. That is a hard student body. Yes, that is hard. And I would argue with that knowledge, I never knew Tulsa was so small that you punch above your weight. You might be 119 in these ratings, but to your point, like, let me just think really quickly. Who's the most famous Tulsa football player? I can do this. There was a running back not long ago that came from Tulsa. Maybe could have been long ago.
Well, you talking about Damaris Johnson? Charles Clay?
I don't know if that's... What if I go back into the 90s? Is there something Tulsa in the 90s?
My buddy Jerry would know this. Jerry Ostrowski was All-American offensive lineman at Tulsa in 1991. I have to go check. But Zaven Collins also came out of Tulsa.
Can you do this? Who's the best? That's the defensive end. The defensive end you're talking about.
Linebacker. I was just naming players at this point.
Maybe that's who I'm thinking of. Yeah, him.
Well, we got one over there. Is
he still in the league right now?
Right? We got Tyler Johnson over there at Dallas.
Oh yeah, Tyler Johnson's. Not Johnson. Smith.
Tyler Smith. Thank you.
Yeah, the offensive lineman from Tulsa. That's right. All right. Okay, speaking of nephews, I got a nephew at a program too, okay? And I got a nephew at a program who's on your top 5 best non-conference games to watch this season.
Okay.
And he's in a battle for the starting position right now. And part of me doesn't want him to win the job because he not week 1, because he goes to Clemson. And he's battling to start at center at Clemson right now. He's a sophomore. And if you win that job, you go out against a Georgia defensive line on week 1. And I don't know that that's the trial by fire I want. He played last year. He played a lot of games last year. But I don't want that to be the biggest referendum on your job. Clemson's on your resume. Clemson's a tough program at this point. Here's a program, big-time recruits, meaning he still does a good job recruiting high school, Dabo, and he stays out of the transfer portal. And everybody's doing this thing about, is it going to catch up to Dabo? Are they going to fall out? You've got Clemson at number 19 right there, and you said this game against Georgia in week 1 is going to define whether or not they're back to essentially tier 1, a national title contender.
I think to the point about the offensive line versus defensive line, believe it or not, this is the least tested defensive line I've seen at Georgia in the last 5 years. Okay, we're talking about Nazir Stackhouse. We're talking about Warren Brinson. I think if you wanted Georgia over the last 5 years, you want them right now. That's what I think, right? So there's one. 2 is only Dabo can do what Dabo is doing. And I know this because Brent Venables came from Clemson, tried to do what Dabo did, and had to change course quick, fast, and in a hurry, because you got to go get the beef and you got to go get it quickly. Now, I also want to add in here, one of the things that doesn't get said enough about Dabo is he was never a coordinator, okay? His whole get down is wide receiver to we're fired, interim head coach, to head coach, and then he's had a generational run of talent at that quarterback position. Now, this you'll know, right? Following Texas high school football recruiting, Cade Klubnik beat Quinn Ewers in a state championship game. Okay? I'm thinking if Garrett Riley wants to get back on the good foot, because remember, he got stomped out at Texas Christian by Georgia, this is the time to do it. I think you're also got Clemson circling the wagons in a way that for the first time, they're starting to feel it. They're starting to feel, oh, people are forgetting about us. And all they did was win 9-10 games last year. And I'm going, I don't forget about them. Every year they're right there. I think this is the year you want to get them because everybody's expecting Georgia to get back to the national championship game. Everybody's expecting Georgia to finish what they started in the SEC championship. And I think August 31st is kind of sneaking up on all of us. So perhaps it's a 1-score game going in the second half, and then we'll make it do what it do, baby. But after that, I think we're going to figure out who Clemson is. Kind of like what they did against Florida State last year. They win that game, we're talking about Clemson totally differently, and they were right there.
Well, to your point, by the way, and this is in support of my nephew, like I'm taking your word for it on Georgia's defensive line this year. If this is a year you want them, if you want to get them, this is the year to get them. You're going in practice every day against I've been reading a little bit, like actually it's not as good as you thought it would be, but you would think the Clemson defensive line is about as good as it gets. I mean, in practice, you're going against some real studs up and down the depth chart. Like Peter Woods is a sophomore too, and you got to deal with him who's not even a starter on that Clemson defensive line. And so you're already playing big boy ball, talking about my nephew, going against Clemson's defensive line. Maybe Georgia actually is a reprieve.
Ooh, I'm not gonna go that far. I'm not gonna go that far. Only because, look, you turned out Trayvon Walker. You turned like Mykel Williams is over there. I keep going on about that Georgia defense because one of the things that always impresses me is everybody knows they're good, but nobody knows who was good until the NFL draft because you could just throw guys in there. That said, I think the guy that I'm really going to watch in that game on the Clemson defense is Barrett Carter. That dude, Dabo called one of the best pure football players that I have seen in 20 years. And he can do anything you ask him to do, right? It's not unlike what we had with Isaiah Simmons a few years back when I called him a destroyer of worlds, because you could put that dude at pass rush, free safety, strong safety, inside. He could do it all. Barrett gives you that versatility, which is going to allow those guys to rotate in a little bit more frequently on the defensive line, as you're going to be looking around going, where's Barrett Carter before you do anything else? And you may lose track of some of these other 4 or 5-star players that Dabo Swinney has just, in the cupboard, ready to go at Clemson.
The nephew's name is Harris Sewell. Keep an eye lookout for him. Let's see if he gets the job here. I don't know. We're playing this weekend, so I don't know. Might go to the upperclassmen this weekend, but watch throughout the season. Okay, so you don't have – this isn't a college football playoff projection, but this is a ranking. And if I go top 12, and again, that's not allowing for a group of 5 champion to come in here and make the playoffs and that sort of thing. But your top 12, as we mentioned, includes 7 SEC teams. It would be 1, 2, 3 Big Ten teams, 1 Big 12 team, and 1 ACC team. I have that right? So you've got the SEC dominating all. It's not just a Big 2 this year in your mind. It's a Big 1. And by the way, I think you're also being pretty generous to Michigan. I'm actually not so sure about Michigan this year in the same way. I don't have anything against Michigan, except that they play Texas this year. But I'm not sold on Michigan. So what I'm getting at is you've got an SEC-dominated college football in 2024, except for Ohio State.
Well, there's a reflection of the last 20 years is what we're really doing if we talk about this. But I also think, the college football playoff selection committee has proven they don't always know football, and they don't always know what they're talking about because they're going to leave out undefeated teams that won conference championships and Power 4 conferences, which goes against everything that we tell these kids. We tell them it's a team sport. We tell them one player does not matter. And we tell them if you win it every game you play, you will get a shot to play for the belt. Florida State didn't get that. So I'm not going to trust them to do what I might do. Now, these rankings to start, these are all to win the national championship, not necessarily to make the playoff, right? And there is a distinction there. There is a distinction because you'll look at the group of 5. I got Memphis at 37 as my highest rank, but they're going to get one of those slots. This is, for me, more about just how deep we think the SEC is going into this season and, frankly, how not as deep the Big Ten is going to be. But to the Michigan point, I got history there. So I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to tell on myself for a second, but I think you'll get where I'm going with this. So following 2021, you turn over the coordinators, right? Jim Harbaugh is Jim Harbaugh. We don't know who the starting quarterback is. We know that Cade McNamara, J.J. McCarthy is going to do it. And he's going to let this thing go into the season. We don't really like that. We don't like turning over coordinators. We don't like turning over offensive line. We don't like you changing out staff unless your name is Nick Saban and you earn that. Okay. So I just didn't rank him in the top 25 because I didn't think it was a top 25 team. And I had point by point analysis for why I didn't do this. Okay. What'd they do? They go and they win the Big Ten championship game, right? Make the college football playoff again. You know, they find a way, dude. That's the problem. They find a way. Every time I think that they're going to get in it, like with the Connor Stallions thing last year, or Jim Harbaugh coaching just 9 games of 15, Sharon Moore being suspended, also being acting head coach. Those kids just don't seem to care. They go show up, they beat the hell out of who it is that they're supposed to beat the hell out of, and they go and win the national championship in a year where I would not have picked them to do that. And yet and still, I was 5 weeks ahead of the AP and the College Football Playoff Selection Committee in the rankings, having Michigan at number 1, having learned my lesson in 2022, going, nope, that's the team. That one right there. I don't care about any of this other stuff. I don't care about the coaches. I don't care about the sign stealing. I care that those kids went out there and beat everybody that they were asked to beat, and they were beating them going away. So I'm going to tell you, there isn't really good analysis for it. There's only anecdotal knowledge, but underestimate Michigan at your own peril.
So I want to ask you one more thing about rankings like this. You know, I think there's a legitimate argument people make about preseason rankings in college football and how bad they can be, meaning not how off they are, but what they do to creating an alternate reality from the objective reality that's about to play out before our eyes. So in other words, everything you got here is reputational and projection. It's your guess, and everyone's doing it, right? And the problem is, I'm just curious your thoughts on this. So let's just take Texas, because we'll be it both ways. You've got Texas at 3. Mm-hmm. Everybody should know, by the way, RJ has Ohio State at 1. If Texas starts the season poorly, or Texas loses 2 or 3 games, it's like they always benefit from being seen as a preseason top 3. Or it's like that reputation carries you through mistakes that we don't afford other programs that aren't ranked high at the outset. And I've seen people say we shouldn't do any rankings. We should do no rankings until we've seen 3 or 4 weeks of college football, because some of these games are patsies and layups and that kind of thing, right? So until we see evidence, what's the point? We're just doing this based off brand and reputation and what you did with a different roster a year ago.
Two things. One, we level set, right? There's some Yahoo that voted for Vanderbilt to win the SEC. Two of them. Now, what if there was more than one? What if that really does influence, because it does in the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, how teams get into the playoff or not? Okay, so we're going to level set. That's number one. Number two is we need to understand this is what the public will allow. And I think that's the part about this that is really interesting from what I'm doing. Michigan being left out of the top 25 in 2022 was not something the public will allow. They do not want to see any analysis that says so because they feel here that they're right. Okay, so that rankings are also a reflection of what people expect to happen and what they want to happen. Now, if I'm going through this piece by piece in a different way, and I'm going, who would I want to be there? Well, I mean, Colorado's going to move the needle. Why not make them number one? Ohio State has a fan base of over 600,000, right? Why not put them at number one? There's all sorts of reasons as to why to do this, but I think that's the way I look at it is what will the public allow? And then based on what they will allow, who fits the criteria? And usually those are blue bloods with a tremendous reputation in the sport going back over 100 years.
What the public will allow. That's interesting. Because it's not necessarily, that's an admission that it's not objective reality. But also setting the college football playoff isn't an objective reality. To your point of leaving out Florida State. The public won't allow you leaving out Alabama or whatever the situation is that allows that. It's interesting in that what you're saying is perception defines reality. And so you have to pre-bake in some account for perception.
Yes.
Which isn't right.
Yes.
Which isn't right. I don't mean it's wrong by you. I'm just saying it isn't right that that's how we're doing these things and how we make decisions as people.
When we started talking, you're saying people are going to argue because it's college football, right? And people want their opinions to matter. I tried to do this thing once where I was ranking teams based on did you win, right? So by the middle of the season, you're looking at UTSA as a top 10 team a couple of years ago because they refused to lose. And I believe that if you beat everybody on your schedule, you should have an opportunity to play for the championship. And nobody but me wanted that to happen. Okay. So Liberty gets into the Fiesta Bowl last year because they're the highest ranked Group of 5 champion. And they get absolutely destroyed by Oregon. And people going, I don't want that. To which I also ask folks, would you rather that there's just a G5 national championship and there's a Power 4 national championship? And most people want that to be the case. They do not want to see a team like Liberty show up to get beat down. And as these rankings are projected, you look on that list, you'll see Jacksonville State at number 67. Okay. You'll see UTSA at number 49. You'll see Washington at number 83. Why? Because Jacksonville State has an easier road to the national championship. If they beat everybody in Conference USA and they win the championship and they're the highest ranked Group of 5 contender, they're in the playoff. Washington needs to win 10 games, probably against 4 ranked opponents, just to be in the conversation. And I think as that reality comes to set in, people are going to go, okay, enough. No, there's no way that I'm going to let Jacksonville State into our playoff over a team like Washington. And then we're going to see, once again, some reshuffling of the board.
All right, last question for you, RJ. I don't remember the stat exactly, but I believe every year, maybe it's top 10, every year there has been a team from outside the top 10 that arrives at the top of the debate in college football that no one saw coming. And by converse now, there's every year been a team that has been a top 10 team preseason who's nowhere near the top 25 by the end of the season. So in other words, there's always some huge surprise in both directions. If you're looking at it right now, who is going to be the big surprise to enter the debate that even you right now don't have ranked highly, or that you think, or maybe everybody else doesn't and you do, and who's going to drop out? Like who is everybody believes is a top 10 team and will not be there, even in the rankings when we get to the end of the season?
I'm going to answer the first part second. So I'm going to say Missouri is probably going to be that team that's dropping out of the top 10, out of the top 25. I think we put a lot of stock into Missouri based on what they did last year and what they did against a weak Ohio State team. And they got a soft schedule. They got a really soft schedule in the SEC. They've been blessed. The thing that I would also point to is as you're watching college football play out, pay attention to which NIL collectives are in lockstep with the university athletic department. Missouri set the standard for being ahead of the curve in how they are marketing their players and how they got everybody pulling in the same direction with their collective, and they're being rewarded with a top 10 team, a team that won the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State, no matter what that Ohio State team was made up of. You're seeing that in G5 too. Memphis got $25 million from FedEx just for name, image, and likeness because they do not want to be seen as a group of five university. They want to be a big boy university. So in that realm, I think we're going to look at a couple of programs, one which is football, and I just love them, Iowa State. I think could end up there. I got them as a top 25 team. Most people don't, but I think they can rise to that level. They're that good. The one that I think is really going to get under people's skin is Southern Methodist. I think Rhett has that program right where he needs to have them. And if they manage to upset the number 5 team for me in Florida State, when they go to Gerald J. Ford, everybody else is going to start looking around going, uh-oh, maybe that program is on the rise because now you've let them into the ACC. Now you're saying if they beat Florida State, there's only a couple other teams that are capable of beating them if they beat Florida State. I think that that team in particular is going to reset the curve on what we can expect from these new teams that are vying for these new 12, one of these 12 spots in the playoff.
Yeah, I like the SMU pick. I think that's interesting. I've been talking up SMU a little bit. I still think it's a big jump from the AAC to the ACC, and see how SMU will play against the Clemsons and the Florida States and the Miamis of the world. So we'll see. They've got a good quarterback. We'll see. We'll see exactly how they line up. And I like, here's what I like about your Iowa State pick is I don't see anybody in the Big 12. Like your highest ranked Big 12 team is Utah at 12. And I mean, Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas State, Kansas. I just don't see a overwhelming favorite here. It's not like there's no Georgia, there's no Ohio State in this conference. And so all it takes is somebody like Iowa State to go on a run, and you could go from nowhere to in the top 10 conversation by dominating the Big 12.
And they probably will. Like, the way I look at this is Matt Campbell showed up and turned that program into a winner. Like, people want to throw out the plague year, as I call COVID 2020. I call it the plague year because it worked for Alabama, which I think put together one of the great seasons of all college football. But it also worked for Iowa State, who took Brock Purdy and a unanimous All-American in Breece Hall and said, hey, look, we're going to go do what it do, and we're going to go play for a Fiesta Bowl, and we're going to beat Oregon. Like that, who saw that coming from them? And Matt Campbell is one of, I think, the really underrated coaches in our sport. I genuinely believe that. And every time there seems to be no real clear-cut favorite in the Big 12, here they come. But to your point, I could go down 10 teams there and give you an argument for which one of those could win the Big 12 championship. Utah's just the one that's shown that they could do that in the Pac-12, so we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. But Oklahoma State's right there too, man. Like golly, Bedlam. I'm glad we don't play Bedlam this year because that one would probably give me hives because they got Ollie Gordon, they got those 5 offensive linemen. They're good, right? Yeah,
and that's Bedlam. And also, it's just Bedlam. I mean, it's a win for you to get that off your schedule because it's a crazy game. And we get A&M back. So we add that back. You guys get rid of Bedlam, so rivalry games make it harder. So, okay, fine. We got the easier schedule than you this year, but ongoing, RJ, just feel like we got Michigans and Ohio States and all that here at Texas. So when the SEC schedule flips year after year, you're going to get the easy schedule here.
Here's the thing. Here's my thing about that real quick. Year one of this thing is going to be the level set. So if Texas wins in the SEC, that will be the new power going forward. Think about 2014 Ohio State, right? I think that's the thing. That's why I'm upset, right? You're right. It's going to come back around, but you have it right now.
Right.
You hold serve.
You think year one can carry you for a while? What, in terms of recruiting classes and who you'll be over the next, let's say, 5 to 6 years?
Yes, and what the public will expect from you, right? We make jokes about Texas being back for a decade. Now you're back. Take advantage. By the way, A&M, Texas, I would love to be there, man. I was asked, like, what one game would you want to go to? A&M, Texas. Why? Because they absolutely, positively hate each other. And I love watching other people hate each other. Like, that's my favorite. I'm excited about that one.
Do you think, are you a little worried? So I don't know how old you are, RJ. We both have nephews. But when I was growing up, A&M was the number one rival. Okay, that's when I was a kid. Then it shifted to Texas OU, and I actually really enjoy the Texas OU rivalry. Like, I think it's one of the best in college football. I love that it's in Dallas. I love it's a Cotton Bowl, State Fair, the whole thing. And so for most of my, like, I'm going to call it young adult life, it was Texas OU, and A&M kind of went away. But the truth is, history-wise, it is Texas A&M that is the bigger rivalry between the two. And I do worry a little bit that we've lost this golden period. And by the way, your biggest rival wasn't Texas during your big 8 years and all that. You know, it was more Nebraska. Than it was Texas. So I do worry that we're going to return to a time where Texas OU is always a big game, but it's not like if you asked people for the past 20 years, name your 5 biggest college football rivalries, Texas OU is in the 5 biggest college football rivalries. It's Ohio State, Michigan, it's Alabama, Auburn, and it would be Texas OU. It may not be anymore if now Texas and Texas A&M are their biggest rivals with each other.
We are going from a regional sport to a national sport, and I have this discussion for the past decade. It is simply, I grew up, I'm 37, so we'll do that, right? I grew up at a time when you can watch national college football. You can pick a team. You can pick USC as your team in 2004 because you'll get to watch them on television anytime you want. And I think that is one of the unforeseen outcomes that we had in the 1984 NCAA lawsuit that Oklahoma and Georgia won, going, we want to be able to play on national TV whenever we want. So you get the formation of the Big 12 in 1995, and we get that natural rivalry inside of the conference that was OU Nebraska, that was OU Texas, and as one got better than the other, they went away. Like, quiet as it is kept, A&M ain't won nothing in the 21st century. 1998's their last conference championship, no national championships since before World War II. We talk about them because it's nice and because they have a large fan base, not because they've been great, right? Even when they were great, when Kevin Sumlin was still head coach, it just didn't come together for them in the way that you would want. I think the other thing to take into account with this is my generation of fan get to say, hey, OU Texas means something to me because it was on ABC. It was on network television. When that game is no longer on network television, it will fall out of those top 5 rivalries. Until that happens, that's going to be it. Perception of what the big game is what are we telling you the big game is? If we're telling you the big game is on ABC or CBS or NBC, that's just what it is.
It'll stay on ABC, right? I mean, Disney has the SEC rights.
Yes.
It'll stay on ABC. Yeah.
Well, unless if it's not a ranked matchup, would it?
I think it always has been. It's also, by the way, it's time slot. It's time slot with that 11 a.m. kickoff or whatever. Like, there's just not a lot of. There hasn't been historically a lot of competition. I know Big Noon Kickoff puts a Big Ten game in that slot now as well. So, I think. And let's hope that we both stay ranked in our new home at the SEC.
Hey, look.
He's Fox Sports National College Football.
That's the thing, man. That's the thing.
He's Fox Sports National College Football analyst. You can check him out at foxsports.com. He's also on the Fox Sports app. Again, he's ranked 1 to 134. Also put out top 5 rankings in quarterbacks. He's got top 100 superstars coming out. Make sure you check out RJ Young. Love to have you on throughout the season, RJ. Thanks for doing this today on The Will Cain Show.
Thank you for having me, Will.